Alright guys, what is up? It is Joseph here, back for another NFL video, and today for the top 100 players of 2020 we are going to be looking at spots number 90 through 81 and just talking about the player rankings and what are my thoughts and kind of opinions on the rankings. So let's get right into it. Starting out here in spot number 90, we have Kyler Murray, who had a pretty good rookie year, For the Cardinals, I feel like most people didn't really have a lot of high expectations for them, but I thought they did well with what they had, and Kyler played pretty well. He made some big plays, made some mistakes, but overall not too bad for his first year. He's a guy who came in and really just made the Cardinals much more dynamic and interesting and fun to watch. And he's a guy that I think is going to have some high expectations next year for himself, and I think he's a player that I think really can take the next step and become a Pro Bowl caliber type quarterback next year. As for a spot at number 90, I'm fine with that, honestly. I mean, it was just his rookie year. He made a lot of great plays, did a lot of great things, but ultimately the Cardinals weren't that successful, and, he made some mistakes along the way. I guess you can make the argument for him to be a little higher, but ultimately Kyler had a pretty solid rookie year, and I think 90 is a perfectly fine spot for him. And at spot number 89, we have Kupp, who really broke out onto the scene in 2019. Had 1,100 yards, I think like 10 touchdowns, like 80 catches. He's a guy who in the past has been doing well in the Rams system, but was kind of a WR3 there with Brandon Cooks and Kupp kind of leading the show. But coming to 2019, he really just stole the show. I mean, he was a very good receiver for them, and I think he's a guy who's young, hungry, and is going to make a lot more plays for them in the future. He comes in at spot number 89, which I think is a little low for him. I mean, I know this was kind of like his first real big breakout year, but he played pretty well. It'll be interesting to see how things go the next few years for him and his Rams. Obviously, they went from a Super Bowl contender to kind of an average, mediocre team. And, he thrived really well in that system. But now Brandon Cooks is out. He plays for the Texans now, so it's just Robert Woods and him as far as some of the primary receivers go. So we'll see how he does, basically as the team's WR1. Not only to mention, but Robert Woods is getting older, so this basically can be Cooper Kupp's offense, once he continues to work hard and get better. So we'll see how things turn out for him over the next few years. Overall, pretty solid year for him. I feel like he should be a little higher just for how much of a successful season he had, but it was just his first year, so we'll see how things turn out for him and the Rams next year. After Cooper Kupp, though, we at spot number 88, we have Jalen Smith, who had a pretty successful year himself. He's just been a beast in the trenches for the Cowboys. Very athletic, very fast, very strong, agile. Can get it done in coverage, can get it done against the run. Him and Leighton Vander Esch have made for a great linebacker duo for the Cowboys the past 2 years, and it has helped their defense tremendously. Coming in at spot number 88, I feel like, again, is a little low. I feel like almost all of these guys up here in the later numbers of this list could be up higher and be in lower numbers, like the 60s or 50s for Jalen Smith. But ultimately, there are a lot of good players in this league, and Jalen Smith had a great year. But I think his spot number 88 is somewhat justified. Like I said, I feel like maybe he could be in the lower 80s or maybe 70s. But pretty successful year for him, and just we'll have to see how things go for him and his Cowboys next year. After Jalen Smith, though, in spot number 87, we have Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. He's a guy who really helped turn this Bills franchise around. Remember his rookie year, they were 6-10, turned them around to 11-5, I believe, and back into the playoffs, where they almost won a playoff game, actually, and he played really hard and really gave it his all throughout the season. Now, some people think that he is criminally underrated. Some people think that he is average at best and that he was carried by a good Buffalo team. Regardless, though, he helped them turn it around from a pretty mediocre to bad team to a pretty solid, good defensive football team. That's not to say he didn't struggle, because he had his errors throughout the season, and he didn't exactly excel, but he did improve to some degree, at least numbers-wise, and, maybe the accuracy still isn't there yet, but he's definitely got the arm strength and the heart and willpower to lead this team, and he was successful. They went 11-5, and if you're a Buffalo fan, I feel like you couldn't be more happy with that. As for spot at number 87, maybe you could say he should be higher just because of his success, but at the end of the day, he did struggle a little bit with accuracy and just as a QB, but pretty solid and successful year for Buffalo. It'll be interesting to see how things go next year with Tom Brady out of that division. Now, coming in at spot number 86, we have Marlon Humphrey, who had a pretty strong year with the Ravens. Him and Marcus Peters made for a pretty good dynamic duo in Baltimore. Obviously, they had a very successful season. Lamar Jackson won MVP, and Humphrey played great. And, I think 86 is fine for him. Like I said, with many of the other guys on this list, maybe you could justify an argument for him to be higher. But ultimately, I think 86 is fine. Played a pretty solid year. To me, is he kind of like one of the top tier elite corners? Maybe I'm gonna say no though. He's probably like the B tier type corners. A B tier type corner. You got your A tier. I think he's more in the B tier. But he's young, he's hungry, and I think he, with another solid year next year, could really make that jump into the elite. The best of the best type corners. But pretty solid year from Humphrey and the Ravens. Next up in spot number 85, we have Zach Ertz. Personally, I think this ranking is fine for him. He had a really, really good year in 2018 with the Eagles, had over 1,000 yards, like 90 catches. This year, it wasn't as successful. Actually, I think this year he had like 90-some catches, or like 88 or something. The year before that, though, I think he had over 100. So, you could say he had a down year, but, realistically, he had like 88 catches, I think, over 900 yards, and like 6 touchdowns. And that's not a bad year for a tight end, especially with the Eagles. They struggled a lot with the receivers, so having a tight end like Zach Ertz who produced is more than welcome feeling for them. But he did not have the year he had in 2018, so I think obviously he made a big drop from 40 to 85, but ultimately I think 85 is a fine spot for him. And to me anyway, he's never really been one of the best tight ends in the game. I think that spot right now is reserved for Kelsey and Kittle. Ertz has always been kind of like Marlon Humphrey is now, just a B-tier tight end who's pretty good, but he's not great or elite or game-changing. But he's been solid and is consistent, and I think is going to continue to produce as long as he's in Philadelphia. Now, after Zach Ertz, we have a guy at spot number 84, Cam Hayward, who has been tearing up the interior with the Steelers for the past few years now. I was never the biggest fan of his game whenever he entered the league, but he's just been on a tear the past 3 years and continues to rack up sacks, pressures, tackles for loss, just all of that good stuff. And that's really all you can ask for. He plays some DN, plays some defensive tackle. He's a big dude. He makes plays, and he's always in the backfield. He's a disruptor. That's what he does, and his spot at number 84, I think, is pretty justified. Maybe you can make the argument for him being higher, but pretty solid year from him, and honestly, I think 84 is a fine spot for Cam Hayward. Next up at spot number 83, we have Eric Kendricks, who's another guy that I've never really been the biggest fan of his game as well. But he's been consistent and has produced year in and year out for the Vikings. And again, this year he had a pretty solid year. I think he had like 140 tackles and has just been a stalwart there on the defense for the Vikings in the run and the pass. The Vikings had a solid year. They didn't necessarily blow people out of the water, but they won a playoff game versus my Saints, which, as a Saints fan, it's embarrassing that we lost to them again. But honestly, what did I expect? It's the Saints. Anyways, enough about the Saints. Hendricks comes in the spot number 83. I think that's a fine spot for him as well. Solid year, and he did pretty well. So, spot number 83, I like it. Next up at spot number 82, we have one of my Saints players being Ryan Ramczyk. Now, he's a guy, as a Saints fan, I'm going to obviously support Ryan Ramczyk, and I honestly do think he should be higher on this list. He was a first-team All-Pro. He's been great the past 3 years with the Saints. He's very consistent, and he just shuts down other teams' great defensive ends. That's what he does. And like I said, you could just think I'm just saying that because I'm a Saints fan. Yes, that's partially true, but Ryan Ramczyk has been great. And for him to be a first-team All-Pro and be at spot number 82 on the list, just like Jason Kelsey was a first-team All-Pro, it just doesn't make sense. How's he going to be the 94th? How's Kelsey going to be the 94th best player and Ramczyk be the 82nd best player when they were both first-team All-Pros, on the best team of 2019? So, to me, that doesn't make too much sense, but it is what it is. I think Ramczyk should be higher. He's a great player. He's consistent. Great dude as well. Unfortunately, for the Saints, things did not go well for us but at the end of the year. But it is what it is. But Ramczyk had a great year, and I think 82 is a bit too low for him. So, yeah. And finally, at spot number 81, we have DK Metcalf, who had a pretty great year. He's a guy that a lot of people weren't really too high on coming into the draft. He was a second-round draft pick. Some people thought he was just a freak athlete who really wasn't going to translate his game well to the field in the NFL, but he was just great. He had like 1,000 yards, I believe. It was pretty solid. Really was a great WR2, number 2 threat for the Seahawks with Tyler Lockett. Made their offense much more scary. He, again, was a freak athlete and was great and fast and strong. But not only that, but he really translated his game from college into the NFL greatly. and it showed on the field. As for spot at number 81, I think 81's a fine spot for him, but for him to be above first-team All-Pros like Jason Kelce and Ryan Ramczyk, to me that just doesn't make too much sense. He's a rookie, had a good year, but he wasn't a first-team All-Pro like some of these guys. So for me, I think he's a little high, but he had a great year, and he's popular, and I think he's going to continue to get better. And honestly, I'm excited to see where he goes from now, because for a rookie year to do what he did was pretty impressive, and was a great selection by the Seahawks. We'll see how things go for them next year, though. Anyways, y'all, that's all I've got today. This was slots number 90 through 81. The next video will be 80 through 71. So, yeah, thanks for watching. Those are just my thoughts and opinions on the list, and I'll see y'all next time.